Hey, it's Logan Christopher here with the Legendary Strength Podcast. This episode, we won't be having an interview. Been doing a ton of those lately, but I felt that, especially after the last interview with Sean Croxton, we talked a little bit about nutrition and physical degeneration, the book by Weston A. Price, and I've just been reading that, just finished that, and I felt that going through this book was important enough to devote a whole podcast to it, some of the lessons learned in here. Here's the thing, a lot of people talk about this book, but I don't think that many people actually read the book because it's an intimidating book. It is about 600, no, over 500 pages with fairly small text. A lot of a lot of words in there to go through. But what I want to do in this episode is give you some of the ideas, but also read some of the quotes and different things from the book as they are, just to give you an idea of what is found in this book. Like I said, a lot of people have talked about this. You have the whole Weston A. Price Foundation is still around. Other people promoting this, getting back to natural foods. Here's why this is such an important book. Back when we were really natives to the land in all different parts of the world, our health was much better than it is today. There wasn't all these sorts of degenerative diseases. Sure, people didn't have the comforts and we didn't have Western medicine, which can certainly be helpful in some cases, but people didn't need medicine on the same level they needed. They weren't getting sick and staying sick and having chronic injuries and illnesses and everything throughout their life. And for a large part, that's because of how they ate. So Weston A. Price was a dentist that went around researching all these different native populations that were still around. Today there's even less of these native populations, but there's still some out there, like there's still some Aborigines out in Australia, still some tribes in Africa that haven't really been touched by modern culture. Here's the cool thing about it. He went and studied, and as a dentist, he was looking at what he calls dental caries. I believe that's the same thing as dental cavities. And he was looking at these in the people, also the shape of their jaw and all that stuff. If people are interested in buying horses, one thing they'll look at is the teeth, because the teeth are going to show the quality of the animal on some level. It's the same with humans. It's the same with any other animal. If you have a whole bunch of dental problems, your whole body is not going to be that healthy. You can't have dental problems without not having great health in your full body. I know as a kid, I really didn't actually go to the dentist all that much, but I had a whole lot of cavities. My diet was crappy. I got sick all the time. Now I still don't go to the dentist very often, but I don't need to because I know I have adequate nutrition and I'm able to take care of my teeth on my own, because it's not brushing your teeth is important, but it's not really about that as much as it is the food that you eat that is going to build the teeth and keep them strong from the inside out. So, like I said, we're going to dive into this book and talk about some specifics, but also the general ideas. The book starts out with talking about, what are some of the commonalities of the different diets, and we'll get to the specifics of the different areas, which is also really cool. A lot of different native people had lots of raw food in their diet. Some of them also had almost all cooked food. There generally was some sort of mix, and with the raw food, this wasn't just fruits and vegetables, but also animal foods as well. Raw milk, but also raw meat, even raw blood when you get the Maasai tribes. Some of them had a lot of plant food. Some of them had very little plant food. One thing was that there are no ancient cultures, no native peoples that relied 100% on plant food, that didn't have any sort of animal product, and I'll be reading a couple quotes about that. So some of them had lots of animals, some of them didn't involve a lot, but all had at least some of it. Now with their food, all of it was fresh. It was provided by nature, wasn't refined in any sort of way. All of the diets had some salt involved, and something that for me is very important, because so many people recommend, you got to eat a variety of foods. And I think with how we live today, that can be a good thing, because by eating a variety, you are more likely to, capture some of those vitamins and minerals and different things you need from those foods. But these cultures, they didn't have foods coming from faraway lands. They only got what was in their immediate area, so there wasn't a whole lot of variety in their diet. They had regular foods that they ate basically every single day. And thinking about this a little more, I think it's actually probably a superior way to eat, to not eat endless varieties. I mean, your body will get used to the foods, especially if you're eating the same things just about every single day, with some seasonal changes, but your body's not going to have to work to process all these different things. If it can get used to things that work really well for it, then that's less energy spent with the digestion process, or less things that can go wrong if you have the right foods that are adequate in all the nutrition needed. One of the big things from the book is the talk about fat-soluble vitamins, but let's actually dive in right now. I'm going to be reading different sections from here. There's a page near the back that gives a good recap. So this book is split up into numerous different sections, but the first half, about half of the book, is covering the different cultures from around the world and what foods that they eat, and also the difference from looking at their teeth, how good is it, and then once they switch to westernized foods, what sort of problems did they have. And all of them had basically almost no dental cavities, looked great and fine, and had very low instances of things like tuberculosis. But when those people switched to western foods, then these problems became rampant. That's why this is such an important thing, because you're actually able to look and study against something natural. You have that actual control group versus what happens when they start eating these worse foods. So it's very cool stuff. I do recommend you read this book if you really want to go deeper into that, but with this overview, I hope to share, most of the big lessons. This is very cool. It actually starts with an account of the Swiss. A lot of paleo people like to quote this book, and a lot of good things about paleo, but at the same time, the Swiss here, what was their diet? Dairy foods and grains, rye bread, with meat about once a week, and vegetables as available, which was chiefly in the summer. So grains and dairy, which is what everyone's saying is bad, but you have to understand their grains are kind of different than the wheat. Our wheat has been hybridized to have a whole lot more gluten. If you actually go back to the ancient grains, or you get it from areas and you make sure that it is freshly ground instead of processed and refined, and all the things that happen with grains today, then you're likely going to find it's going to work much better for you, even if you have gluten problems. Alright, anyway, I'm just going to read through this section. The people of the outer hybrids area accomplished high immunity with the use of seafoods, oat cake, and oat porridge with limited vegetables in season. Marine plants were also used. The Eskimos and Indians of Alaska and the far north accomplished high immunity with sea and land animal tissues used as foods, but limited vegetables and very limited seeds. Green foods were used in season, and in some districts were stored. The organs of animals were used liberally. The people of the South Sea Islands, whether Polynesian, Melanesian, or Micronesian, provided a high immunity with a liberal use of sea animal foods, marine and land plants, limited seeds, and lily roots or taro. The cattle tribes of Africa established their high immunity by the use of milk, blood, and meat supplemented by plant foods. The agricultural tribes of Africa used domestic animals, utilizing their organs, freshwater animal life, insects, and a variety of plants. The Australian Aborigines established their high immunity by the use of large and small wild animal life, wild plants, and where available, freshwater or marine sea life, large and small. The New Zealand Maori had a high immunity to dental caries by a liberal use of sea animal life, marine plants, marine birds and their eggs, land birds, seeds of trees and plants and vegetables, particularly fern root. The Indians of the plains of North and South America provided a high immunity by the liberal use of the organs and tissues of wild animal life, a large variety of plant foods, and fresh and saltwater animal life as available. The coastal Indian tribes of North and South America provided a high immunity by a liberal use of sea animal life together with plant life of the coastal region. The Amazon jungle Indians provided a high immunity with a liberal use of freshwater animal life, small land animals and birds, and wild plants and seeds. In all of these groups, the displacing diets that consisted of the foods of commerce were more or less highly refined sugars, refined flours, canned goods, vegetable fats, and polished rice. And that's where problems began to happen. So there's an overview of that, so you can basically with that skip through 200 pages of this text. But you'll see the commonalities in there, as well as some of the differences in how these different people ate. People ate according to what was available to them. So let's dive in and talk about some more specific things, as well as some stories and everything in here. This, as a strong person, this is very interesting. An average adult Eskimo man can carry 100 pounds in each hand and 100 pounds in his teeth with ease for a considerable distance. Yes, having the right foods is going to help you to be stronger. That is quite obvious, and why I cover nutrition along with all the strength stuff. Everyone thinks that, fruits and vegetables, mainly fruits, only way to get vitamin C, but that's not actually true. The Indians were getting vitamin C from adrenal glands and organs. Modern science has very recently discovered that the adrenal glands are the richest sources of vitamin C in all animal and plant tissues. They have some stories in there as well about people that are coming down with vitamin C deficiency, so they specifically go out and find an organ in order for that person to consume in order to combat scurvy or the problems they have with that. Let's see. Several of the tribes neighboring Ethiopia are agriculturists and grow corn, beans, millet, sweet potatoes, bananas, kefir, corn, and other grains as their chief articles of food. And these people overall were quite healthy in comparison to the Western people and their diets. But it says here, physically, they were not as well built as either the tribes using dairy products liberally or those using fish from the freshwater lakes and streams. They have been dominated because they possess less courage and resourcefulness. So even though you can go much more natural with the grains and fruits, it does seem that animal foods of some sort, one sort or another, are quite essential for bringing out the best in us. I found this very fascinating because I'd never heard of anything like this. The wonderful wisdom of the primitive people was attested by the principal of the public school at Palm Island. A mother died and her nursing infant was taken care of by its maternal grandmother, who had not recently given birth to a child. She proceeded to carry out the primitive formula for providing breast food by artificial means. Her method was to make an ointment of the fresh bodies of an insect which made its nest in the leaves of a certain tree. This she rubbed on her breast and in a short time produced milk liberally for this foster child. I had no clue that kind of stuff was even possible. That is awesome. So there's a lot in this book about birth, and we'll be covering a little bit more of that as we go along. Just flip into my next tab section here. There's quite a bit of talk in this book about insects as well, which is not a normal dietary food for us. Actually, in stuff like cereals, like cornflakes, they're allowed to get a certain amount of insects in those foods, but generally it's not quite that much, and people will shy away from insects. Another insect source of vitamins used frequently by the natives is the ant, which is collected from great ant hills that in many districts grow to heights of 10 feet or more. In the mating season, the ants develop wings and come out of the ant hills in great quantities and go into the air for the mating process. These expeditions are frequently made during or following a rain. The natives have developed procedures for inducing these ants to come out by covering over the opening with bushes to give the effects of clouds and then pounding on the ground to give an imitation of rain. We were told by the missionaries that one of the great luxuries was an ant pie, but unfortunately they were not able to supply us with this delicacy. So ants, as well as locusts and grubs and different things as well. Ants are actually something that I'm personally taking in. I don't eat ants, but over at supermanherbs.com we have ants available. Very powerful food. and that's really what it is. It's a food. I mean, it's called an herb, but powerful stuff, tons of minerals like zinc and everything else. So it's very important stuff. I like this quote. I have been impressed with the superior quality of the human stock developed by nature wherever a liberal source of seafoods existed. It's talking about the importance of seafood and all kinds of seafood, shellfish, fish, different forms of animal life in the sea, as well as the vegetables like kelp and different seaweeds. Also, dried fish eggs. Those were actually a very important food for a number of different cultures as well, especially for children and pregnant women. But here's an interesting thing, and this is something I first learned from Daniel Vitalis of Sir Thrival. He's talking about the importance of clay and how all different ancient cultures consume clay. This here is specifically talking about the, let's see, it is also of interest that among this group in the Andes, among those in Central Africa, and among the Aborigines of Australia, each knapsack that they carried contained a ball of clay, a little of which was dissolved in water. Into this they dipped their morsels of food while eating. Their explanation was to prevent sick stomach. Clay is important for being able to pull out toxins. Thus there's many sort of detox protocols that will incorporate clay, but if it's consumed along with food, you can get the nutritive qualities of that food as well as mitigate sick stomach, as it says here. So interesting stuff. As yet, I have not found a single group of primitive racial stock which was building and maintaining excellent bodies by living entirely on plant foods. I have found in many parts of the world most devout representatives of modern ethical systems advocating the restrictions of foods to the vegetable products. In every instance where the groups involved have been long under this teaching, I found evidence of degeneration. So, there is a call not to be a vegan. For some people, I think this day and age, if you're very smart about it, being a vegan can probably be done properly. Definitely can be done much better than a lot of vegans out there are doing it. However, it's not our natural diet. That is my opinion. Here we go with a description of a meal plan from Weston A. Price. For children specifically. About 4 ounces of tomato juice or orange juice and a teaspoonful of a mixture of equal parts of a very high vitamin natural cod liver oil and an especially high vitamin butter was given at the beginning of the meal. They then received a bowl containing approximately a pint of a very rich vegetable and meat stew made largely from bone marrow and fine cuts of tender meat. The meat was usually broiled separately to retain its juice and then chopped very fine and added to the bone marrow meat soup, which also contained finely chopped vegetables and plenty of very yellow carrots. For the next course, they had cooked fruit with very little sweetening and rolls made from freshly ground whole wheat, which were spread with the high vitamin butter. The wheat for the rolls was ground fresh every day in a motor-driven coffee mill. Each child was also given 2 glasses of fresh whole milk. The menu was varied from day to day by substituting for the meat stew, fish chowder, or organs of animals. So, hopefully, reading that, it made you hungry. If not, you may need to change your tastes in order to get healthier with your nutrition. I would love to have that meal myself right now. Sounds very good. The Indians of the high Andes were willing to go hundreds of miles to the sea to get kelp and fish eggs for the use of their people. So I was talking about people weren't traveling in order to get foods. Understand, they didn't have cars and vehicles, so hundreds of miles is quite a distance. But that's the importance of this food. They were willing to travel in order to get these foods. So that is fascinating in and of itself. When a high vitamin natural cod liver oil is used in conjunction with a high vitamin butter oil, the mixture is more efficient than either alone. So this was mentioned in that little meal plan right there. The reason for this is the different fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, and K, these seem to work together. So when you actually bring them together in how you eat them, it seems to have a synergistic effect. Also, by taking these vitamins, because they're fat soluble, with something that has a lot of fat in it, i.e. the butter, then you're going to get more absorption of these nutrients. So even if you're just taking something like fish oil that is supposed to be taken with a high fat meal of the day, something like vitamin, or also do this with vitamin D, vitamin A, vitamin K. If you're taking those in supplemental form, take it with a high fat meal of the day. The birth of a congenitally malformed child may be only one expression of a prolonged decrease in functional reproductive activity, the other expressions being miscarriages, stillbirths, and premature births. The stuff on birth is very interesting here. If you're thinking of having a child, I would recommend you read this book. It might scare you away from it. No, it probably won't do that, but we'll get some quotes here about how the natives went after childbirth. This is it is not only a matter of disgrace, but an actual abomination for an Ibo woman to bear children at shorter intervals than about 3 years. The idea of a fixed minimum period between births is based on several sound principles. The belief prevails strongly that it is necessary for this interval to elapse in order to ensure the mother being able to recuperate her strength completely and thus be in a thoroughly fit condition to bear another child. Should a second child be born within the prescribed period, the theory is held that it must inevitably be weak and sickly and its chances jeopardized. Husbands abstain from any intercourse with their wives, not only during pregnancy, but also throughout the period of lactation. That's how far they take it. After the birth of a child, the husband was not supposed to cohabit with his wife until the child could walk. So a lot of these different cultures would not only have special diets for women before they conceived, but also sometimes for men before they conceived. Slightly changed, but once again, special diets all during the pregnancy period, and then of course making sure they have special diets through nursing and for the children as they grow up. That formative period for kids, which goes from preconception through birth and then as a growing child, if you get that right from other stuff that I've read, that's going to set someone up for superior health throughout their life. I actually reading through this book and once again some other research, I know that I am not genetically superior. I'm not genetically strong. If you look at my teeth, you can see this in any of my videos where you got a close-up. I don't have straight teeth. They were never straightened as a child. So that just goes to show that my parents didn't know this stuff, so I don't blame them for this, but they didn't do these things right as the natives did as far as good nutrition. I certainly didn't, as a formative child, have great nutrition. So I definitely did not start off with everything right. If you are planning to have a child, I highly recommend take some time, do some detoxing, clean up your diet before you even conceive, and be sure to eat clean and do everything you possibly can to give all the benefits you can of nutrition to that child. If we observe the parts of an animal that a cat eats when it kills a small rodent or bird, we see that it does not select exclusively the muscle meat, unlike us humans who only eat the muscle meat. During my biological investigations using animals, I've had barn rats gnaw their way into the room where the rabbits were kept and kill several animals during a night. On 2 different occasions, only the eyes of the rabbits had been eaten, and the blood may have been sucked. On another occasion, the brains had been eaten. It was evident that these rats had a conscious need for special food elements that were provided by these tissues. The organs have so much more nutrition in them than the muscle meat that it is well worth eating. I've gotten away from doing that myself after first really experimenting with it, but once again, reading through this book, I want to do more. Just quick one here, a diet low in vitamin A will cause reproductive failure. So, if you're looking to get pregnant, make sure you have vitamin A. The country's average level of general ability sinks lower with each generation. Should the ballot be restricted to citizens able to take care of themselves, 1 out of 4 cannot. This comes from Laird in The Tail That Wags the Nation. Just interesting quote with some truth to it. This is very interesting. Another section in this book talks about physical, mental, and moral deterioration. How not having proper nutrition, both for yourself but also what your parents had in forming you, is going to lead people to become idiots and also criminals. He states that deformed palates are present in 19% of the ordinary population, 33% of the insane, 55% of criminals, but no less than 61% of idiots. Fascinating stuff. Criminal tendencies in the isolated primitives are so slight that no prisons are required. More on pregnancy, it talks about not only do our teeth get deformed, our facial structure, our breathing passages to the point where people can't breathe through the nose but must instead breathe through the mouth, but also in the narrowing of the hips, which is the cause of women this day and age having much harder childbirths than primitives used to have. There's stories in here of women just going out to the bush, having the child, coming back as if it's not a big thing. But with our degeneration, it's become harder and harder and requires surgery often and all these other problems. Yeah, here we go. Among primitive races living in a primitive state, childbirth was a very simple and rapid process, accompanied by little fear or apprehension. I like this concept here, inhibited heredity. That not only do we get passed down genetically what we have, but if they don't have the proper nutrition, then if our parents don't have the proper nutrition, then we can't get that heredity passed down properly. That genetic blueprint won't be passed down properly. So this, once again, the importance of your parents' nutrition in how strong you're going to be. And yes, this will actually have to do with physical fitness and strength as well. So some of us, there are definitely people born stronger than others, and there are those of us like myself that were born very weak and scrawny and had to build everything up from the ground up. I do think this can be overcome. I mean, you have the field of epigenetics. Once you realize this stuff, you can start to take care of nutrition yourself. But even then, that foundation won't quite be there. And this will have to do with your health through the long term, but also even longevity as well. Our bodies need a certain amount of fresh minerals every day with which to manufacture blood. The days that these minerals are not provided in the foods, they will be taken from our storage deposits, the skeleton. This is what leads to bad teeth. This is what leads to osteoporosis. So, once again, important thing to know. These findings show that there has been, over the period of years, a progressive increase in skeletal deformities, including arthritis and dental caries, together with a reduction in stature, suggesting a direct relationship to progressive depletion of the soil. So it's not just about your food, but how the food was grown. Most people involved in nutrition know or have heard of this, that a food can't have minerals in it that the soil doesn't have. It needs to have good quality minerals in there and in quantities quite available in order for the plant to be able to take them up. So it's very important to have well-grown food. Now, organic food is going to have much higher minerals and vitamins and everything than conventional produce, but even then, if the soil is depleted, it's not going to be of that much value. Because of this fact, and almost all food grown doesn't have, the highest quality soil available. I mean, people aren't just scavenging wild foods and getting in places that are untouched. You do need to supplement your diet, because unless you are growing all your own stuff and taking great care of the soil, you're just probably not getting enough. Here's another thing on clay. The use of clay or aluminum silicate, which modern science has learned has the important quality of being able to absorb and thus collect toxic substances and other products. Let's see. We human beings of modern civilization are at a great disadvantage in the selection of foods in that we seem to have lost a sixth sense by which we would recognize a specific need for special food. Many of the primitive races and most animals retain the capacity to satisfy the body's needs by choosing the foods that will provide minerals and vitamins. There's quite a few descriptions of studies in there where food that looks no different, the animals will choose one over the other of the one that was grown in the superior soil. They're able to tell that. The title of chapter 23, Food is Fabricated Soil Fertility. That right there just speaks to the importance of that. We can no longer think of foods as having a fixed value, for such value varies according to the soil content. Like we already talked about, I believe that unless the present dietetic and health customs of the white nations are reorganized, social decay and race deterioration are inevitable. Well, really hasn't gotten that much better since this book was originally published, and I don't perceive it actually getting that better. The quote, it's the best of times and the worst of times. You know, you have all this information available, you're listening to this, you're getting this information, you can take things into your own hands. Most people aren't willing to. The country's average level of general ability sinks lower with each generation. And to some degree this may be planned by people that want it so, but I don't want to get all conspiracy theory on you here. Out of every 100 pregnancies in the United States, 25 are lost before birth. That's very interesting. I wonder how that statistic is right now. We will consider these expressions of modern degeneration under two main headings, namely those caused chiefly by the faulty nutrition of the affected individual, something that you can take care of yourself, and those caused in large part by parental deficiencies which affect function. So that's what I was talking about. You know, there's only so much you can do, but I think you can do a lot by yourself. So even if you can't control the other things, you know, you can't control it. So why bother thinking about it all that much? Here's an example. Cavemen had better eyesight than modern men. Not only were my teeth messed up, but I had horrible vision. I actually got that corrected with LASIK surgery, but that's just another form of deterioration that can happen because of our lack of proper nutrition. There's a difference between animal and plant proteins in building blocks for the body. Protein is a grow food, whereas carbohydrate is a go food. Animal proteins differ in nutritional quality depending on the fertility of the soil where the animals graze. So this isn't just about fruits and vegetables being grown in soil, but you have to think the animals that are eating the grass or whatever they're eating, what is the soil content of that food to be able to translate it up the chain. And processing of foods destroys heat-liable factors that are necessary to maintaining normal health. These are just some examples of things learned by school children that were taught this stuff. Very important factors, all of those. All right, we're nearing the end here. At the very back of the book, there's a discussion of acid and base, or acid-alkaline balance of the diets. I'll probably have to post this little picture on the website, but in hearing about this, Weston A. Price looked at the acid-base content of primitive and modern diets, and he found that immunity-producing diets were found to be higher in acid factors than in base factors. So even today, all these people are producing alkaline, but he actually looked at people where you can really find a good control and study. Now, I think that most people in going towards a healthier diet are going to tend to eat more alkaline foods, like green vegetables, definitely a good thing, but here it's saying acid and base of the food really doesn't matter. It is not my belief that this is related to potential acidity or potential alkalinity of the food, but to the mineral and activator content of the nutrition. So, acid and base, not important. That's what Weston A. Price says. And, you know, based on the work he did, I think I'm going to trust him. We have a sense of hunger, which expresses itself as appetite, yet we have almost no sense of hunger for the minerals and other chemicals and vitamins that are needed for building and repairing old tissues. If you could grow the sense and become more consciously aware of what your body needs, I think you would attain much greater health. There is a misapprehension regarding the value of fruits as food. Of course, fruits are desirable as an adjunct, but most of them are very low in minerals. The best butter is made in June. This is much richer than butter made during the other seasons of the year. Butter should be eaten chiefly for its vitamin content. Interesting stuff there. Oh, I really like this story. Your question with regard to wheat and the length of time the germ will be usable is important. In your winter climate, the flour should contain most of its vitamin E for a week. In hot weather, however, the oxidation takes place rapidly. I asked an old Indian whom I saw grinding corn between two stones why he did not use larger stones and grind a whole lot at a time. His reply to all of my questions was, "No good." When I reduced the time down for the flour to be used in 3 days, he still said no. When I asked him why, he said, "Something gone." His magnificent physical condition at a very advanced age strongly testified to the wisdom of his program. His tribe lived largely on sheep and goats, the milk and flesh, and on corn and some green foods. So, if you are going to do grains, one, I would go back towards a more ancient one. Don't necessarily just go with wheat, but if you get something like rye or spelt, there's other ones. If you go from the Peruvian area, you have quinoa. So different things are available, but if you're going to eat these, then it's a good thing to freshly grind them if you're going to make grains and not just use them. You can cook just full grains like oats and different things. So there's some different ways you can use them, and all of that's going to be better than any bread that's commercially available. We require more phosphorus than any other single element for maintaining body function from day to day. I did not know that. So there's an important mineral. You're going to find lots of phosphorus in meats and animal products. So that is an overview of this book. Lots of specific quotes from there. If you want more information, read the book. It is well worth doing, but I gave you a lot of the main and specific points of this. So just to recap, raw foods and cooked foods, not that important it seems. Acid and base, not that important. What is important is eating fresh foods, as fresh as you can get them for the most part. It doesn't talk too much about preserving foods in different ways, but through fermentation, also salt can be used. So there is some of that, but a lot of stuff is fresh because they didn't have refrigeration. Not that much variety. All had animal foods, whether dairy and eating the meat or even the blood. And insects, all kinds of different things in there you can play with. By taking in these foods, you're going to be much healthier. One of the biggest things he talks about is getting the fat-soluble vitamins A, D, and what he calls activator X, which has since been labeled as vitamin K. All very important that you get them in good quantities, and this sort of stuff you're going to find a lot in organ meats and different things like that, fish eggs. If you are planning on having children, spend some time detoxing your body first, but also special, more nutritious diet before conception for both men and women, but then also during all of pregnancy and while nursing, and giving special foods to kids just to ensure that if you build that foundation, they're going to be they'll be smarter. They'll literally be smarter. They'll be much more active, be much stronger, and they're going to have longer lasts because of it. That's probably the best gift you can give your child besides raising them properly besides that. On top of that, spacing the children apart is a very important thing to do. So like I said, a lot more details in the book, but that will give you a fair overview of some different things. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you have any questions on the material, be sure to let me know. But I had a lot of fun putting this together for you because, like I said, I wanted to learn this stuff in more depth, and me teaching it to you, going through and giving you the most important points helps me to understand and be able to recall this material even better. I do want to let you know tomorrow, as of the day after this podcast is released, going to be releasing not one but 3 new books, special package. If you're into bodyweight training, be on the lookout for that because that has some great stuff. I'm happy to provide it to you. So that's it for this podcast. I'll talk to you next week.